Yamim that says he was actually kind of Gava Levi. He became very full of himself because he was cured, and so that was, he also showed all the treasures and so on. Apparently, that Marsha mentions about the treasure first to his wife. His wife was serving and called Pimus, so it wasn't so modest to have his wife serve.
You mentioned that. Yeah, it's interesting. You're saying that after Chizkiah got healed,
it became very strong. You know, we think of Chizkiah as a complete tzaddik, and I'll show you the verse.
He became more self-assured.
More than that, Gava Lev is the term. Yeah,
what it should have been is like Yaakov, which when he begot Hashem's bracha, he said, "Katanti mikol hachasadim." I became humble because of all my blessings.
Yeah. Here it is. Gava Levi.
Straight pasuk.
Yeah, he was humble afterwards, but first it was Gava Levi.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, 104a, Kuf Daled Amud Aleph.
It's held the punishment until another generation.
So we're middle of analyzing Eicha, the Lamentations, and we discussed the opening words. The opening word Eicha, its numerical value. We discussed the fact that Eicha is set up in Aleph Beis, letters of Aleph Beis, because the Jews desecrated the Torah written by Aleph Beis, and therefore they got Eicha, Lamentations, set up in Aleph Beis, in the order of the Aleph Beis. And then we got to Eicha Yashva Badad. How is it that the people sat alone? And we talked about being alone in the positive sense, which resulted in the lack of standing alone in the positive sense, resulted in, we can get to that in a minute, and resulted in standing alone in the negative sense. Now we continue analyzing that opening verse of Eicha. So it's 4 lines from the bottom of the page, the 5th word, Ha'ir. So the pasuk continues reading. The first said, Eicha Yashav Badad. How is it that they're sitting alone? Ha'ir Abbasiyam, the city of multitude people. In other words, it's a poetic way the verse is saying, lamenting, how does this great city full of people sit now alone and desolate? So it's describing it as a place with lots of people. Rava explains, in order to sorry, do you want to get the door, please? Thank you. So the Rava explains the name of Rabbi Yochanan. We're going to finish the old packet and start the new one. They would set up shidduchim, they would set up marriages in such a way that the young young girls would marry elder men. And a...
that's a zake, means older than...
No, more mature.
Yeah, because actually more advised an old man should marry a young girl.
Yeah, I don't know if the Gemara is saying this in a positive sense at all.
No, it's a good thing. It's
anyway,
gadol means that kind of older.
Not necessarily, not old. I should say old man.
Minor, and a gadol is like a...
So it's a younger woman with a more mature man. Vigdola and a more mature woman lakatan to a younger man. And it actually explains woman's fertility seems like comes earlier than man's fertility. So if a man is not fertile yet, so marrying him off to a young girl is postponing the ability for offspring. But if you have a older woman who's anyways not fertile, not an older woman, not an elderly woman, but someone's a little older, to a man who's not necessarily fully developed in terms of his fertility, then you're not losing anything. You're not losing anybody because neither of them are so fertile anyway. But if you have a young, you balance it out. A younger woman who's more fertile and an older man, more mature person who's fully developed in his fertility, then you can produce much quicker. That's how it actually explains this. And therefore, Abbasiyam, therefore, is a city of multitude of people because they would set up their marriage in such a way that they maximized fertility. That they had many children to maximize the fertility, as we just explained.
Yeah, cut doesn't mean left out. Obviously.
I don't mean that's what Rashi doesn't say. It means a minor. It means someone who's more developed versus less developed. In other words, they maximize fertility and development. We'll look at the old pack, the last line, and then we're almost done this packet. The verse continues. So the verse continues reading. How this city stands alone of many people. We explained that it stands alone. We talked about it yesterday. Multiple people, as in they've maximized fertility. And then the verse continues. Haisa Kalmana became like a widow. The city is like a widow. So Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yehuda.
Sounds like Tisha B'Av.
This is from Tisha B'Av. It's Eicha.
Oh, this is Eicha. Oh, okay.
We're analyzing Eicha from Tisha B'Av. Yes.
Sorry.
The verses from Eicha, yeah.
Correct. We're talking about Tisha B'Av. We're going to get into more Tisha B'Av soon.
Sorry.
Amar Yehuda, Amar Rav. What is the name of Rav? The verse says, Hoisa ka'almana. It was like a widow. V'loy almana mamish, but not literally a widow. Meaning the husband hasn't fully abandoned him. Hashem hasn't abandoned the Jewish people. Almana, being a literal widow, would mean literally there's a widow, there's no more husband. God. Hashem is gone. But chas v'shalom, God forbid, God is always with the Jewish people. And therefore it's ki almana, they were like widows. What does that mean? Ela ki isha, like a woman, shahalach ba'al b'dinis hayam, whose husband went overseas, and he told her, I'm coming back. And therefore that's his intention, to come back. And that's why it's ke'almana, she's like a widow. And her husband's not with her now, but her husband still waits for the day to come back.
Let's call them a war widow.
A war widow, yeah. In halach they call them manes chayos, living widows. As in their husbands are alive, but they're effectively widows because they can't. They're effectively widows because they have no husbands, but they're living widows in that they can't remarry. Right? So that's the state of the Jewish people. We can't leave Hashem because Hashem is still there. Hashem still wants us. Right? But we're not. On the other hand,
we can't find him.
The other component is we can safely assume that good morning, when a husband is the Gemara doesn't say that the woman's desire is to come back to her husband. It says daito. It's talking about God's intention, meaning to say the pain of separation is equally for Hashem himself, who himself wants to come back home. And in some sense is waiting for the Jews' invitation, as it were. But the pain of separation is equal for both. We're about to get there on the top.
Yeah, before over here.
Okay. Now we get to a wonderful story.
No, for tomorrow, or for today.
For today? So the pasuk continues.
In a few minutes.
Right, so the pasuk continues. So Eicha Yasher B'dad, we're going through each line of the verse here. Each word of the verse. Eicha Yasher B'dad, we analyze that, sitting alone. Ha'ir Rabasiyam, the city that was of multiple people, we just talked about that, they had maximized fertility. Hoisa Kalmana, they were like widows, not actual widows, because Hashem does not, God forbid, the attachment, the connection between God and the Jew is not sever, God forbid. God himself is like the husband waiting to come back home. And the verse continues. Rabasi Bagoyim, Sharasib Medinas, great amongst the nations, masters in their countries. That's how the verse continues describing Jerusalem. And it goes on to say, Haisha Lamas became like, Lamas means like disintegrated, it fell apart.
Or also be for taxes and Lamas.
It's a play on words, but I don't think it means that in the literal sense.
Or they were they had to, before they were leaders, now they're paying tribute, taxes to others.
Okay. So it says the word like this. Amar Rava says, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. The verse is saying that Kol Makom Shein Hoichin, wherever Jewish people go, Nasasarim Ladeneim, they become ministers to their masters. So the Jews in exile never become masters, but they're always second in command. This is true throughout, like all of our history. That's been the case. Starting from Yosef, but you're talking about post-exile here. Post-exile, post the Jews were left wherever they were, whether in Spain, whether it's the Sephardi area of Spain, or later in North Africa, or whether they were in Europe. Jews were always the ministers, never the top, but always the ministers. And it actually worked to both their positive and their negative. The Jews were very successful because of that in many cases. Today we'd call it the middle class, but it was much more than middle class, because there was no middle class. There was the paupers, there were the Jews, and then right on top of that were the landowners, like the pritzim, the potters, the
aristocracy.
The full aristocracy. And the Jews were always the ones who controlled their money, the money lending, so they did very well. And it also was to their detriment, because the people, the plebs, hated them, because look at those Jews taking all our money, and the ministers hated them because these are the guys we owed money to all the time. So a lot of times it got us kicked out of countries. The expulsions from France, from England, and all revolved around this. The fact that Jews were ministers in that they were like they were the middle class. They were the doctors, the lawyers, the money lenders, the bankers. So everybody hates them.
I always felt growing up that I was the most hated kid on the street.
All the white kids hated me because I was Jewish.
And all the black kids.
All the black kids hated me because I was white.
So there you go. Between a rock and a hard place, literally. Okay.
Now
So-
we're making up for it. Everybody loves you.
Yeah. So now the Gemara can tell us a story like this of how Jews.
Almost.
The Gemara is now going to tell us a story of how Jews have this way of making themselves as assets to their captors. In other words, we're in exile, and we become the biggest asset to our host countries. Sarim Ladunaya, ministers to our masters, right, as we just described throughout all of history. But the Gemara is going to give a story that illustrates this. It's a very, I don't want to say cute story, but it's a nice little story, a little detective work. And I'm sure there's some spiritual layers to it, and I've started thinking a little bit about it. I'll share with you what my thoughts are, and hopefully we'll come with something. Okay, so the story goes like this. Tanu Rabban and our sages taught the following story. Ma'aseh b'shnei bnei Adam is a story of two people, Jewish people, shenishbu b'Har Carmel, who were held captive in Har Carmel, Mount of Carmel. Yeah, it's not uncommon that people were held captive by pirates, highway robbery, literally, and then they were held for ransom. Not uncommon, which is why caravans were so popular. That's what caravans were. Instead of traveling alone, we have a higher risk of being held for ransom. You travel in a group and you have less chance of being attacked. And hopefully amongst you have some fighters who can actually...
Getting lost.
Getting lost, or to a large degree is because of people getting held captive. Right? In the cities you had police and judges if they weren't corrupt. But in the highways, who's patrolling miles and miles between one city and the next?
The highwayman.
No one's patrolling that, right? So it's not uncommon. So two Jews are traveling and they get captured. And their captor was walking behind them. Now you can go to the next packet. Kodalad Mabeis 104b. So Amalei Echad Mehem Lechaveroi. So one of the captives, one of the two people that were captured, said to his friend, "Gomo shemalachas lefanenu." You see that camel a couple of miles down the road? So number one, Suma ba'achas be'ein now. He's blind in one of his eyes. The camel up there. And it's carrying two noidos are like leather flasks or skin flasks. So they used to carry liquids in back then. They're like a pouch, like a skin pouch or like a leather pouch, something like that. So carrying they said it's got two of them.
Wineskins, right?
The wineskins, that's correct. That's what they're called, wineskins. That's the word. That's right. Meaning like it was a way of making it light as possible. So this camel's carrying two such wineskins. Acha shal yain, one's full of wine, v'acha shal shemen, one's full of oil. V'shnei bnei adam manhigam, and there are two people that are pulling the camel. So that's directing this camel. Echad Yisrael, one is a Jew, v'echad Nachri, and one's not a Jew. This is what he said to his friend, looking at the camel some distance ahead.
The camera separated them?
No. They're
Just kidding.
two people walking, two captors walking, one captive behind them, and some place in front of them is a camel walking with two people. And the people captive one observed the other. It's blind in one eye. It's carrying one wineskin full of wine, one wineskin full of oil. The two people walking with them, one's Jewish and one's not Jewish. Okay? So Amar Lahen Shabai, so the captor said to them, Am Ksheiref, you stubborn people, referring to him as, derogatorily referring to the Jew with biblical inference. You stiff-necked people, how do you know this? The guy's a mile ahead of you. How do you know that he's blind and the camel is blind and this? So Amar Loi, so the captor said to the captive said to the captor, Gamal, the camel, Masavim shel fana, is the grass that's in front of it, Mitzad Shiraya, on one side, Eichelis is constantly eating. So it must be he sees that grass. Mitzad She'ein Raya, Ein Eichelis, but it's never eating from the other side. So you notice that the camel in front of it is only eating on one side, which means that it must be blind from the other. Okay? And it's carrying, how do I know that it's carrying two wineskins, Acha shal yain, v'acha shemen, one of oil and one of wine? Why? Because I can see drips coming out of the things dripping from the camel. Right? It's carrying a big wineskin full of oil and full of wine, and I see little drips. So shal yain metaftif v'shoikeas. I see that one of them every time it drips, it seeps into the ground. So it's got to be a regular, ordinary liquid. Now, it wouldn't be carrying water; it's carrying wine. V'shal shemen mitaptev itself. But I see another from another one of the wineskins. I see drips also coming out, but that drip is not seeping into the ground. It's staying above the ground. So it must be oil. And finally, my last observation, which was Shnei b'nei Adam HaManhigam, the two people that are directing this camel, Eicha, that's pulling this camel. One is Echad Nochri, one is Jewish, Echad Yisrael, one's a Goy, one's not Jewish. Echad Yisrael, one's Jewish. How do I know? Because Nochri nifnei l'derech. The non-Jew, when he has to go to the bathroom, he has to relieve himself. He does it right where he is in the middle of the road.
You call the Jew from the Gentile because the oil corresponds to the Jews.
Yeah, so the non-Jew, every time he wants to relieve himself, does so in the street. And that's how I know he can't be Jewish. For Yisrael, nifnei l'tzadim. And the Jew walks off the road for a couple of yards and then relieves himself. So I see one's modest, one's immodest in terms of how they relieve themselves. So I know one's Jewish, one's not Jewish. There's his detective work in coming to all these conclusions. So the captor, of course, is very impressed. So he runs after that camel with the two people. And he finds that the Jew made a true observation. His captives. He came back and kissed them on the forehead, on the head. And the captor brings the captives into his home. Makes them a big feast. He's dancing in front of them. He's all excited. He met these geniuses. Yeah. And he says, Baruch Shabachar B'Zarei Shel Avraham, praised is Hashem who chose from the seed of Avraham, and granted of them from his wisdom. Look how smart these Jews are. And wherever they go, they become masters they become ministers to their masters. And let them free. And these two captives went free and home in peace to their home. Okay, so that's the literal story. And there's no reason to assume that this literal story is not literal. But certainly there's got to be something deeper here. Suggestion. These are the things that I'm thinking about and kind of piecing together. Metaphorically speaking, the camel with the two people are one person, the Jew. And the Jew has two manhigim, two people that guide him. He's got his Yetzer Hara and his Yetzer Tov. He's got his Nefesh Bahamas and Nefesh Elokis, right? In the metaphor here, the Jew and the non-Jew. He has one part of him that's a regular human being, and he has another part of him that's godly. Right? And, that's one element. The other element of the wine versus the oil could be two levels of Torah study. Torah is often referred to many different liquids. Water, it's called milk sometimes, and then wine and oil. And as Chassidus explains, yayin wine is soid, is the level of Torah that's the Kabbalah mysticism, right? Which is why it seeps into the ground. It gets hidden. You can't see it. The wine, maybe, but oil is actually a reference to Chassidus. Why is oil a reference to Chassidus? Because oil has two opposite character traits. On the one hand, oil is tzaf, like it says here. Oil is hovers. It floats above every other.
Like water and oil.
Like water and oil. Oil will always rise to the top. So it's always removed and separate from everything else. On the other hand, the halacha is yain mefafeh b'chol davar. Hashem mefafeh b'chol davar, which means oil saturates everything. Right? But you pour water onto this table, even if it seeps in, it doesn't get so densely. But if you pour oil and you leave it there enough, it's going to seep through the table and completely destroy this table. Because oil really seeps into everything. So it's got two opposite natures. On the one hand, it completely permeates everything. On the other hand, it remains above. So, whereas
over time, I guess.
Over time, that's right. That's correct.
The element of time.
That's correct. So it has these two. So it doesn't. It stays removed from everything else. But on the other hand, with enough time, it actually saturates everything worse than other liquids, or more intense than other liquids. Yeah. So, and this is a metaphor for Chassidus, as explained in Chassidus, in that unlike, let's say, Kabbalah mysticism, remains mystical, or remains hidden. So it's wine; it remains in its place. Chassidus, on the other hand, on the one hand, Chassidus is a separate study from. It's independent of every other element of Torah in some way, just like every other part of Torah is independent from every other part of Torah. On the other hand, a person learns enough Chassidus, it ends up saturating every other part of his Torah learning. And all of his other Torah learning and all of his other...
It
seeps into everything. That's right. Enough learning Chassidus, and it changes the way you understand Gemara, it changes the way you learn, it changes the way you do mitzvahs, changes everything. Because it ends up saturating everything. And furthermore, oil is referred to as always like the essence of something, right? If you squeeze anything, the oil, some liquid will come out. So it's like everything has a certain leichos, everything has a
Lemon
certain.
and olive.
Well, anything literally. How does a microwave work? A microwave doesn't heat up solids; it only heats up liquids, right?
Microwave has solids too.
But how does it heat up solids?
No,
Yeah,
much-
but,
much
Yeah,
easier.
The microwave heats up the liquids in the solid.
Of course, yeah,
That's
yeah,
correct.
yeah.
My point is that even solids have liquid in it.
Everything has liquid.
Everything has liquid in it. That's the shemen. That's like the juice essence of something, right? And that's Chassidus. It finds the juice in everything,
So the nigla would have to be in this example.
right? So nigla is in water, is referred to as water. It's the most obvious of them. It comes to a low place,
Right. There's no water in this thing.
but in this metaphor, there's no water.
It's both nister. It's both hidden.
So maybe perhaps camels themselves carry water. Actually, camels themselves carry water in their
In their humps.
right? They carry themselves water. So he already has water in him. But in order to guide him in the right direction, to fight in his fight between his good and his bad side, he needs a little chassidus, he needs a little nister, he needs needs a little juice to keep himself going. I don't know. These are my thoughts that I have, and I'm leaving the floor
The
open.
Gemara itself clearly says that the study of Nigla is counteracts the Yitzhak, like more Kedushin.
All of Torah does that.
Yeah.
But more actually, the Gemara there says a Marishaba, right?
No,
Not the Gemara. That's
But the Yitzhak, but the
Torah Tavlin.
So
But Torah also could be, as we know, God forbid, some Achaim and some Amavis. It has to be done. So Torah has to be done properly.
But there, the Gemara is not talking about Nisra, it's talking about Nigla.
I understand that.
Sorry, what's
But
the-
even Nigla, sorry?
What's Nigla?
He's saying that Torah's Nigla is revealed part of Torah. The Gemara, he's referring to a Gemara which says that if God creates a Yetzer Hara, and even though to some degree God regrets making Yetzer Hara, he created a counterpart, created a solution,
Yeah, the medicine for
the medicine for the Yetzer Hara, the Tavlin, which is Torah.
Torah. And that's regular.
That's true, and it's all of Torah. But even all of Torah has to be learned properly. As the Gemara elsewhere says, that if God forbid someone merits, Torah is a potion of life. And if God forbid someone doesn't merit, Torah is a potion of the opposite, a potion of death. This is what the Gemara says. The Torah itself has to be learned right. And what that means is up for lots of discussion, many different commentaries. But certainly the way Chassidus understands it, that if Torah is learned with Chassidus, then it becomes a samach with nister, then it becomes a samachayim, a potion of life. Why? Because we know from the Gemara elsewhere, we learned this Gemara, that there are a number of things that are called chaim, that are called life. And all to do with what's connected to Hashem, right? The Yid is connected to Hashem, and therefore it's called life. And Torah is called life because it's connected to Hashem. And therefore, in order for Torah to be a potion of life, a person has to remember that it's not a nice intellectual exercise, but this is God's Torah. And that's one of the big objectives of what Chassidus bring. One big objective of learning Chassidus and learning Nister is to appreciate the godliness embedded in Torah.
So what you just this story and what you just said ties very much into Chaf Daled Tevis, the Alter Rebbe's Yurtzeit.
Yeah.
Because his name was, I know last name.
That's correct.
Shnei Zalman, Shnei or
Two lights, Nigla and Chassidus.
Nigla and Chassidus.
That's correct.
It also ties into the Parsha of this week. There was no coincidence.
Yeah.
Vayera, which means revelation. He revealed himself. So here you get to the story, the revelation of Nigla and Chassidus. Can tie
Shemen.
everything you said into the whole
Wine and oil.
into the Parsha. That's all. It all fits together.
Yeah.
The more didn't talk about Chassidus, though.
No.
The more has to be understood in its context.
It's in literal. That doesn't change from the literal story. I'm just adding perhaps an
Even
interesting
the
dimension.
Torah,
Sorry?
the Torah says if you want to make the Torah's chaim, of course, you have to, of course, make a bracha first from Hashem. Also, like a job of a rabbi, of course, is to guide a person.
Yeah.
And that's why I said a tzaddik is even as death compared to life. So you learn Torah like Malach.
So maybe that's the illusion here. Sarim Ladanim become ministers to their masters. Meaning, no matter how high they get, they remember there's a master. In other words, a person has to have a certain humility to a high level. Maybe that's the illusion there too.
Question to something you just said.
Yeah.
You just said that Hashem
Today.
regrets the creating the Yetzer Hara.
Yeah.
So,
Something we talked about here in the past. Yeah.
okay, so I mean, there's many layers to the question, but if he,
Regrets it. Why not snap and be gone with it?
Why create the first place?
yeah, why? How is it
Yeah.
possible? Well, first of all, how is it possible that he would have made
Something that he regrets.
something that he regrets?
No decision.
And
It's
two,
regrets. It's a big-
why? Yeah, why not
want to snap and be gone with it? This is a very good question, and we discussed it a few times. And what I think the answer is that it's simultaneous regret and simultaneous need. In other words, Hashem has an overarching project, and the overarching project is that there be a Jew with free choice and choose Hashem. Now, there's two layers to this. The ultimate objective is that the Jew choose Hashem, but in order for that choice to be meaningful, he has to be able to choose the opposite, right? So, in theory, every single time a Jew chooses the opposite, Hashem says, "You wasted the point of the project here." The only reason why you had the choice for the negative is so you can choose the positive. So every time you choose the positive, you violated the terms of why we created this free choice to begin with.
The negative, you mean?
I'm sorry, every time a Jew chooses the negative, God forbid.
Positive, the contrary, it's a good thing. That's what Hashem wants.
Every time a person chooses the negative, you violated the reasons for why we created this choice to begin with. So there's an element of regret, even while simultaneously wanting it.
But at the same time, that also contradicts itself.
It's an inherent paradox. Not so much a contradiction. It's an inherent paradox. On the one hand, let me put it this way: it's not a bug. The fact that a person can misbehave is not a bug in the system. It's a feature.
No, that's Hashem designed it.
You're supposed to be able to choose the opposite, to choose bad. But still choosing bad is still bad. Even though it's a feature of your reality, and that's how you're supposed to be, capable of choosing bad, it doesn't change the fact that when a person chooses bad, that's a regretful moment. There's a paradox here.
I understand, but what I'm saying, that contradiction is something else entirely. It's we have free choice, but yet everything happens by the hand of God. That's
a separate discussion here.
Right. So there's no.
Now we're entering into a new discussion.
Right. So but you just answered my question with this other. We have this free choice.
Yeah.
The truth is, we don't have free choice. We don't have free.
We absolutely have free choice.
Yeah, otherwise, it wouldn't be punishment.
We absolutely have free choice.
Yeah. Can do
And how we reconcile that with determinism is a separate question. But we absolutely have free choice.
If you have no free choice, you are a robot.
Yeah, we have free choice.
Yeah, we certainly have free choice. That's a long philosophical discussion, and I did
That's the Perek Chelek,
I did a 4-part series on this, on free choice and determinism. If you want, you can have a look at it. Okay, have a wonderful day, everybody.
Yeah.